This is a clip from one of our recent live streams. We stream live every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. As a reminder, this is our second channel, Fish the Moment Live. Our main channel, Fish the Moment, is where we have all of our highly edited YouTube content. We spend 30 to 40 hours a week producing one YouTube video that's posted on the Fish the Moment channel every Friday at 7 a.m. Central Standard Time. These videos include on-the-water footage of us actually fishing, as well as detailed instruction on how to use electronics, fish offshore, and a lot of other great information. Make sure to check out the Fish the Moment channel if you enjoy the content on this channel.
Yeah, definitely. And the thing that soured me on it is that spot I was telling you about that I won all the big bass, like the big bass derby awards and all, a bunch of tournaments. That last year that we had, the Grand Lake had one of those big bass bashes, and I won the hour. One day I won the hourly award, like I don't know, 4 or 5 out of the 8 hours on this one spot, and a couple boats saw me fishing it because it's out in the middle of nowhere. And anyway, the next year when I came back to that spot, somebody had brushed it all up. They put brush all over it. They found it and they ruined it. And I haven't had a bite there since then, since they, got in that particular spot. But you're right. I mean, it's not back then when I found those spots, those were hard structure spots. They were hard structures. They were like hard breaks. They were point ends and sides that broke off. They were ledges. And what has happened from what I've seen is those hard structure spots aren't as key as they're not as key now as they were back 30 years ago. Now it's more subtle. It's a brush pile off to the side here. It's finding a little group of suspended fish there. It's something a lot more subtle offshore. And I know that, you know what I'm talking about, Johnny, because you're sort of a master at finding those subtle, inobvious type offshore places. But anymore, I mean, if you got a hard break, if you got a creek channel intersection, that's just as obvious as a main lake point right now. So,
Yep.
but and another thing with that, we're talking about, we get a little bit back as far as the shallow water mastery about it, is one of the things that really sort of gives me confidence in the direction I'm headed is okay, is that I just got done qualifying for the Toyota Series Championship. I finished 16th in the points. I didn't use anything but 2D sonar. I didn't even have my front side imaging or down imaging hooked up. I think I'm the only one that qualified for the championship that didn't have a live scope on the boat. So you can still compete at the top levels and do good, with even a flasher. I could have finished 16th in the points with the flasher. It wouldn't have made any difference.
Yeah, I think that's definitely telling of your confidence in that as well. And I think honestly, Randy, it's you made that decision to learn the shallow water game. And I know in the last tournament on Lake Dardanelle that you did really well in. You had the fish on to finish in the top 5 in that tournament. Had some get fish jump off, stuff like that. But you were using a unique bait that no one else was throwing in that area, and you were going right behind in the biggest community hole in the entire area on Lake Dardanelle, and you were able to go right behind people and catch fish all day long with your technique, with your approach. And that's one thing that I do also offshore. And if I just kind of pull up my screen again here, guys, I'll just give you an example. I'll show you a couple areas, kind of what Randy was doing. Randy would catch a lot of fish on Lake Dardanelle this past tournament on these highway bridges right here. These are the most iconic, classic community holes in Lake Dardanelle. Everyone knows when there's a lot of current flow and you can just go fish these bridges. You said you probably had like 30, 40, 50 boats fishing these areas right behind you, right, Randy? Like they were just going.
Yeah, it was
crazy.
ridiculous. Yeah.
So they were all over these spots.
You told me before the tournament to get ready because it was going to be like that, and it was, man.
Yep. So it's like that's how you were able to figure that out. Well, the same thing happens offshore, and this was even happening back in like a tournament. I won a college regional championship in 2013. This is almost 10 years ago now, Randy. And I was fishing on Lake Dardanelle, and I'd found this spot. It's a pretty obvious spot now. People would think it's pretty obvious. But there was a ledge out here that had a bunch of fish on it. And it's a very obvious main river ledge, but there was a little shell bed just off to the side here that I knew about that no one else knew about. But also, these fish were setting up on this ledge, and I've caught some fish the weekend before in a tournament there, finished second place by myself in a team tournament against all the local sticks, and I lost by like just barely. I think I lost by like 2 ounces over the top 2 best guys in the lake, and then they were fishing as a team. I was fishing by myself, so I was just like a few ounces behind them. I came back and won the college tournament. Well, one of the guys, the brothers of one of the guys who was in the tournament, was fishing that tournament, saw me here, and the first morning of the tournament, his brother was sitting right on this spot. I guarantee you they'd never fished there before in their life, or they hadn't fished there that whole year, if anything, because I was the only one out there fishing that stuff. And then because, I was there, they went and they were fishing it. Well, what I figured out was that on this tournament, the current was getting pulled at 11 o'clock every single day. And at 11 o'clock, this area would turn on, and there was a little tiny shell bed over here where I could pull up and catch fish when that current was flowing that no one else was fishing. And because, it was funny because that one guy, he was a local also out there, he fished the spot all morning, never got a bite. Then 7 or 8 other college boats pulled up there and started fishing it because they saw this guy who's a local fishing it. So all these guys were fishing this area, and no one had fished there for like 3 months. I've been on the lake quite a bit. And then I basically pulled in through here and was fishing a small, subtle spot at the right time, and I caught like 15 pounds, 16 pounds here, and I rolled around to another community hole that is a super easy to find little road bed that drops into here that had like 40 boats fish it throughout that day because it's just a very big community hole. I pulled up behind all those guys after probably 30 boats had fished it and threw a hair jig down there, which is back in 2013, that was not a common bait to find. And I caught 2 4-pounders back to back off of this edge of this road bed. If you enjoy our videos and want more help finding bass on your home lake, head to our website, fishthemoment.com, then head to the Lake Breakdowns page. Here we offer lake breakdowns that give you 40 GPS waypoints that you can transfer straight to your fish finder on lakes all across the country. We give you detailed area descriptions, a summary of the lake, and a step-by-step guide on how to download the waypoints to your fish finder. These waypoints are picked out by professional angler Randy Blockett. We have breakdowns on lakes all across the country, broken up by season. If you can't find your lake among the list of lakes available here, we also offer personalized lake breakdowns where you can have your specific lake broken down if it's not already available. Check out our lake breakdowns on fishthemoment.com. Using unique bait. So it was my strategy and my execution that allowed me to get the win in that tournament, and that's something that happens nowadays even more. You have to really dial in your bait, your retrieve, these feeding windows. And it's the same thing that happens up shallow, Randy, honestly. And the reason that I feel like the offshore anglers or offshore fishing is tougher now than ever is that the advantage that anglers used to have when they were fishing offshore is that they could find an area, a hole, that was just good all the time. And they could pull up here and catch fish off this hole, this one like secret spot. Like you have these secret spots out in the middle of the lake. That's not how it works anymore with the offshore fishing. Instead, a lot of times I'm running offshore patterns. I find little groups of fish setting up on different patterns. So for example, on Table Rock Lake, I was out there the other day. Now I was catching a bunch of fish on very obvious points. They're basically these channel swing points where you have the creek channel swinging in and there's these long flat points. Super obvious stuff. But in these areas, there were groups of fish, and you would basically pull up there and you catch one fish per spot. And I would throw like a hair jig or a little swim bait, and I could get 1 or 2 fish to fire. Then I would roll to another one, and I would duplicate that pattern. And I would find those fish with my electronics, catch a fish or 2, and move on, because there was a lot of pressure on these spots. A lot of guys have been fishing these spots. I've shown these spots in videos, which doesn't help at all. But catching fish in these areas, but I was having to kind of bounce around, make a pattern with it, and that might be the exact same thing you do, Randy, when you pull up in the spring and start going back in some of these creeks and fishing some 45-degree banks with a wiggle wart or dragging a shaky head on secondary points up shallow. It's the same mentality. It's just I'm using my electronics to do it, building these patterns. And the only difference between the way that you fish, Randy, and the way that I fish is that I need to use my electronics to see what's on the bottom of the lake out here, because if we look at this, and I just pull up Google Earth here, the areas I'm fishing on like Table Rock or out on Lake Dardanelle, they're out here in the middle of nowhere. So let me just pull up Google Earth just really fast to show you guys like what I'm talking about. If I pull up Google Earth, get rid of this. There we go. So like the areas I'm catching fish on, guys, on Table Rock might be out here randomly in the middle of like 20 feet of water. And I'm using my electronics to find groupings of 10, 15 fish. And then I might have to find 10 of those throughout the day to put together a decent bag of fish. And I have to do that within one fishing day. And I've developed the skills to be able to do that. And I'm actually going to be making a video here pretty soon explaining how long it takes me to find these offshore areas and how my process for finding them. That video is coming out on the main Fish the Moment channel this Friday. And so once I've kind of get my pattern developed and kind of find these fish with the electronics, I'm doing the same thing that Randy might be doing by going into one of these creeks in the spring and fishing all the secondary points and throwing a jerkbait on secondary points. Except for I'm just doing it with my electronics. He still has to dial in the bait, just like I have to dial in the bait. Everything is pretty much identical other than the need to use the electronics, but the knowledge needed for both is completely different. The knowledge, I feel like, for understanding a lot of those shallow fish, the behavior of those shallow fish is very, very different than schools of offshore fish, and it's almost like you have to relearn how bass behave to catch fish in both scenarios. Thanks for checking out the video. If you made it this far, we'd really appreciate if you left a like on the video. It helps us out with the YouTube algorithm and gets these videos out to more people. Also consider subscribing. It's free and it lets you get notifications of every single one of our videos that we upload daily. Finally, remember to check out the main Fish the Moment channel, where we actually have on-the-water fishing footage as well as detailed graphics on electronics, offshore fishing, bass behavior, and a lot of other great information. Thanks for checking out the video, and we'll see you all in the next one.